a man is scared, should he keep it to himself or should he share his fears with his wife?
A lot of people I interviewed, a lot of the therapists I interviewed initially said, it's very important to self-disclose and to say, honey, I'm scared too, but we'll get through this together. And a lot of couples did do that, but then other couples didn't do that. And I interviewed these women at the Lunch Bunch. It's a group in Washington, D.C. of cancer survivors who have lunch once a month. And they're just really tough and frank women. And I said to them, if your husband was afraid during treatment, would you have wanted him to tell you? And they just said to me, hell no, because they felt like they needed space to deal with their own feelings and didn't want to have to assume the role of caregiver for their caregiver, that they didn't want to have to start worrying about their husband. And it is tough for the husband then, because husbands often don't have a circle of really intimate friends they confide in as women might, and for a lot of guys, the person they confide in is their spouse. And now they may feel like, how can I tell her I'm scared that she's going to die because she's dealing with this cancer and I'm not personally dealing with it. So it is a tough place, and I think it's very situational. You just have to kind of read cues and shut up and listen. I think that's sort of the motto. That it sounds very simplistic, but it's really important not to jump in as the guy and try to fix things and to sort of put a positive spin on things, but to let your wife tell you what she's feeling. And then if you've got your own emotions and don't know what to do with them, that is a tough place. And I was really fortunate that one of my wife's cousins had breast cancer, and her husband would call me up. The cousin's husband would call me every couple of weeks and just say, hey, Mark, how you doing? And it was great to be able to talk about how I was doing. And I think that that's so important. And if you can find any of your friends or any guys from a cancer support group or cancer organization that are willing to listen, that's tremendously helpful. And one of the things that struck me during the book when I was interviewing all these guys on the phone is that we were sharing all these emotions that we had gone through during cancer treatment, and we still had them with us, and we didn't really understand them sometimes. And it was so helpful to understand by talking to other guys that, yeah, this crazy thing that I did or I felt, other guys felt that too, that you sort of don't know what's normal or not normal to feel during treatment and after treatment because you've never been through it. And it is incredibly helpful if you can find anyone in your circle of friends, in your family, a colleague at work who can just kind of be your confidant and let those feelings come out. I mean, people are afraid to talk about death, they're afraid to talk about sex. I think those are the two big factors that hover over any cancer diagnosis. And breast cancer is tied up in sexuality for sure. And doctors may not bring these topics up, and you may not feel like you can or want to bring them up, but they're issues that are there, and it's just sort of a question of how you deal with them and whether you feel like you can talk about them. I mean, you asked about fear, and sometimes it's fine to say, honey, I'm afraid too, but we'll get through this together. But sometimes it's important to just be there for your wife and give her the space to let her emotions kind of sort themselves out and for you to help her do that.
So you hear a lot of patients that say that they are generally abstinent during treatment and they have a hard time rekindling with their partner and finding that spark again. Do you find that a lot of the people you talk to have that, and are there things to rekindle that?
Yeah, I mean, that's an interesting and a good question. A lot of people do abstain during chemotherapy and surgery and so on, but Marcia's oncologist was great. I would have felt really silly asking him, but he said to us, it's possible to maintain intimacy during chemotherapy, and it is. I mean, it's not always possible, but I think it's important as a couple to try to, to see, are you able to maintain sexual intimacy during treatment or not? And if you're not, there are many other ways of being intimate, and even something as simple as a back rub or a foot massage can really be a physical connection that's very important that kind of keeps you together. And some guys I interviewed had the attitude, oh, well, I don't want to start something I'm not going to finish. I didn't want to sort of engage in sort of certain kinds of behavior and not have a full sexual experience. And that's really rough. And I think that it's certainly going to be easier to rekindle your romantic relationship after treatment if you've maintained some kind of physical contact and tenderness during treatment, for sure. There are issues. I think talking about these issues is what's important, and really figuring out what sexual activities you can do that give you pleasure. And it's tough. I mean, it's a hard thing to talk about for sure for couples, and it's hard to find people to give you advice on that.